Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes again for another night of story time. We continue Dashiell Hammett's novel, The Red Harvest, and we begin tonight with Chapter 12, A New Deal. I went out to hunt for McSwain. Neither city director nor telephone book told me anything. I did the pool room, cigar stores, speakeasies, looking around first and then asking cautious questions. That got me nothing. I walked the streets looking for bowlegs. That got me nothing. I decided to go back to my hotel, grab a gnat, and resume the hunting at night. In a far corner of the lobby, a man stopped hiding behind a newspaper and came out to meet me. He had bowed legs, a hogjaw, and was McSwain. I nodded carelessly at him, and he walked on toward the elevators. He followed me, mumbling, "Hey, you got a minute?" "Yeah, just about a minute." I stopped, pretending indifference. "Let's get out of sight," he said nervously. I took him up to my room. He straddled the chair and put a match to his mouth. I sat on the side of the bed and waited for him to say something. He chewed his match a while and began. "I'm going to come clean with you, brother. You mean you're going to tell me you knew me when you braced me yesterday?" I asked. "And you were going to tell me Bush hadn't told you to bet on him? And you didn't until afterwards. And you knew about his record because you used to be a bull. And you thought if you could get me to put it on him, you could clean up a little dough playing him." "I'll be damned if I was going to come through with that much," he said. "But since it's all been said, I'll put a yes to it." "Did you clean up?" "I win myself 600 Ironmen." He pushed his hat back, stretched his forehead with the chewed end off of it, and then he chewed on the match some more. "And then I lose myself. That and my own 200 and some in a crap game. What do you think of that? I pick up 600 berries like shooting fish and have to bum 4 bits for breakfast." I said it was a tough break, but that was the kind of world we lived in. He said, "Uh-huh," put a match to the back of his mouth, ground it some more, and added, "That's why I thought I'd come to see you. I used to be in the racket myself, and what did Noonan put these skids under you for?" "Skids? What skids?" "I quit. I come to a piece of change, and when my wife got killed in an automobile accident, insurance, and I quit. I heard he kicked you out the time his brother shot himself." "Well then, you heard wrong. It was just after that, but you can ask him if I didn't quit." "It's not that much to me. Go on, tell me why you came to see me." "I'm busted flat. I know you're a continental op, and I got a pretty good hunch what you're up to here. I'm close to a lot of things going on both sides of things in this burg. There's things I could do for you, being an ex-dick, knowing the ropes both ways. You want a stool pigeon for me?" He looked me straight in the eye and said evenly, "There's no sense in a man picking out the worst name he can find for everything." "I'll give you something to do, McSwain." I took out Myrtle Jennison's document and passed it to him. "Tell me about that." He read it thoroughly, carefully, his lips framing the words, the match wavering up and down in his mouth. He got up, put the paper on the bed beside me, and scowled down at it. "There's something I'll have to find out about this first," he said, very solemnly. "I'll be back in a little while and give you the whole story." I laughed and told him, "Don't be silly. You know I'm not going to let you walk out on me." "I don't know that." He shook his head, still solemn. "Neither do you. All you know is whether you're going to try to stop me." "The answer is yeah," I said while I considered that he was fairly hard and strong, 6 or 7 years younger than I, and 20 or 30 pounds lighter. He stood at the foot of the bed and looked at me with solemn eyes. I sat on the side of the bed and looked at him with whatever kind of eyes I had at the time. We did this for nearly 3 minutes. I used part of the time measuring the distance between us, figuring out how, by throwing my body back on the bed and turning on my hip, I could use my heels in his face if he jumped me. He was too close for me to pull a gun. I had just finished the mental mapping, and then he spoke. That lousy ring wasn't worth no grand. I did swell to get 2 centuries for it. Sit down and tell me about it. He shook his head again and said, First, I want to know what you're meaning to do about it. Cop whisper. I don't mean that. I mean with me. You'll have to go over the hall with me. I won't. Why not? You're only a witness. I'm only a witness that Noonan can bring a bribe-taking or accomplice the act rap on, or both, and he'd be trickled simple to have the chance. This jaw-wagging didn't seem to be leading anywhere, I said. That's too bad, but you're going to see him. Try and take me. I sat up straighter and slid my right hand back to my hip. He grabbed for me. I threw my body back on the bed and did the hip spin, swung my feet at him. It was a good trick, only it didn't work. In his hurry to get me, he bumped the bed aside, just enough to spill me off to the floor. I landed all sprawled out on my back. I kept dragging at my gun while I tried to roll under the bed. Missing me, his lunge carried him over the low floorboard, over the side of the bed. He came down beside me and on the back of his neck, his body somersaulting over. I put the muzzle of my gun in his left eye and said, You're making a fine pair of clowns of us. But still, while I get up, or I'll make an opening in your head for brains to leak in. I got up, found and pocketed my document, and let him get up. Knock the dents out of your hat and put your necktie in front. You won't disgrace me going through the streets. I ordered after I had run a hand over his clothes and found nothing that felt like a weapon. You can suit yourself about remembering that this gat is going to be in my overcoat pocket with a hand on it. He straightened his hat and tie and said, Hey, listen, I'm in this, I guess, and cutting up won't get me nothing. Suppose I be good. Could you forget about the tussle? See, maybe it'd be smoother for me if they thought I'd come along without being dragged. Okay. Thanks, brother. Noonan was out eating. We had to wait a half an hour in his outer office. When he came in, he greeted me with the usual, How are you? That certainly is fine, and the rest of it. He didn't say anything to McSwain, simply eyed him sourly. We went into the chief's private office. He pulled a chair over his desk for me and then sat in his own, ignoring the ex-dick. I gave Noonan the sick girl's document. He gave it a glance, bounced out of his chair, and smashed a fist the size of a cantaloupe into McSwain's face. The punch carried McSwain across the room until the wall stopped him. The wall creaked under the strain, and a framed photograph of Noonan and other city dignitaries welcoming somebody in spats dropped down to the floor with the hit man. The fat chief waddled over, picked up the picture, and beat it to splinters on McSwain's head and shoulders. Noonan came back to his desk, puffing, smiling, saying cheerfully to me, That fellow's a rat if there ever was one. McSwain sat up and looked around, bleeding from the nose, mouth, and head. Noonan roared at him, Come here, you. McSwain said, Yes, Chief, scrambled up and ran over to the desk. Noonan said, Come through or I'll kill you. McSwain said, Yes, Chief. It was like she said, only that rock wasn't worth no grand. But she give it me, and 200 to keep my mouth shut, because I got there just when she asks him, Who did it? Tim? And he says, Max. He says it kind of loud and sharp, like he wanted to get it out before he died, because he died right then, almost before he got it out. That's the way it was, Chief. But the rock wasn't worth no. Damn the rock, Noonan barked. And stop bleeding in my rug. McSwain hunted for it in his pocket for a dirty handkerchief, mopped his nose and mouth with it, and jabbered on. That's the way it was, Chief. Everything else was like I said at the time, only I didn't say anything about hearing him say Max done it. I know I hadn't ought to. Shut up, Noonan said, and pressed one of the buttons on his desk. A uniformed copper came in. The chief jerked a thumb at McSwain and said, Take this baby down to the cellar and let the wrecking crew work on him before you lock him up. McSwain started a desperate plea. "Ah, Chief," but the coppers took him away before he could get any farther. Noonan stuck a cigar at me, tapped the document with another, and asked, "Where's this broad?" "In the city hospital, dying. You'll have to cut her to get a stiff out of her. That one's not so good legally. I framed it for effect. Another thing, I hear that Peak Murray and Whisper aren't playmates anymore. Wasn't Murray one of his alibis?" The chief said, "He was." Picked up one of his phones, said McGraw, and then get hold of Peak Murray to ask him to drop in and have Tony Augusti picked up for that knife throwing. He put the phone down, stood up, made a lot of cigar smoke, and said through it, "I haven't always been on the up and up with you. I thought, putting it mildly, but I didn't say anything," while he went on. "You know, your way. You know what these jobs are? There's this one, and then there's that one that's got to be listened to. Just because a man's police chief doesn't mean he's chief. Maybe you're not a lot of trouble to somebody that can be a lot of trouble to me. Don't make any difference. If I think you're a right guy, I got to play with them. That way they play with me. See what I mean?" I wagged my head to show I did. "That's the way it was," he said, "but no more. This is something else. A new deal. When the old woman kicked off Tim was just a lad. She said to me, 'Take care of him, John,' and I promised I would. And then Whisper murders him on account of that tramp. He's reached down and took my hand. See what I'm getting at? There's a year and a half ago. And you give me my first chance to hang it on him. I'm telling you, there's no man in Personville that's got a voice big enough to talk to you down from this. Not after today." That pleased me, and I said so. We purred at each other until a lanky man with an extremely upturned nose in the middle of a round, freckled face was ushered in. It was Peak Murray. "We were just wondering about the time when Tim died," the chief said, when Murray had been given a chair and a cigar, "where the Whisper was." "You were out at the lake that night, weren't you?" "Yep," Murray said, and another end of his nose got sharper. "With Whisper?" "I wasn't with him all the time." "Were you with him at the time of the shooting?" "Nope." The chief's greenish eyes got smaller and brighter. He asked softly, "You know where he was?" "Nope." The chief sighed in a thoroughly satisfied way and leaned back in his chair. "Damn it, Peak," he said. "You told us before that you weren't, or that you were with him at the bar. Yeah, is that right? You told us you were with him at the bar?" "Yep, I did," the lanky man admitted. "But that don't mean nothing except that he asked me to, and I didn't mind helping out a friend." "Meaning you don't mind standing a perjury rap." "Don't kid me, Murray." Murray spit vigorously at the cuspidor. "I didn't say nothing about no courtrooms." "How about Jerry and George Kelly and O'Brien?" the chief asked. "Did they say they were with him just because he asked them to?" "O'Brien did. I don't know nothing about the others. I was going out of the bar and I run into Whisper, Jerry, and Kelly, and I went back to have a shot with them. Kelly told me Tim had been knocked off. Then Whisper says it never hurts anybody to have an alibi. We were all here at the time, weren't we?" And he looks at O'Brien, who's behind the bar. O'Brien says, "Sure you was." And when Whisper looks to me, I say the same thing. But I don't know no reasons why I've got to cover him up nowadays. And Kelly and Tim, had they been knocked off? Didn't say he had been found dead. "Knocked off" was the words he used. The chief said, "Thanks, Peak. You oughtn't to have done like you did, but what's done is done. How are the kids?" Murray said they were doing fine, only the baby wasn't as fat as he'd like to have him. Noonan phoned the prosecuting attorney's office and had Dart and a stenographer take Peak's story before he left. Noonan, Dart, and the stenographer set out for the city hospital to get a complete statement from Myrtle Jennison. I didn't go along. I decided I needed sleep, told the chief I would see him later, and returned to the hotel. Chapter 13. $200.10. I had my vest unbuttoned when the telephone bell rang. It was Dinah Brand complaining that she'd been trying to get me since 10 o'clock. "Have you done anything on what I told you?" she asked. "I've been looking it over. It seems pretty good. I think maybe I'll crack it this afternoon." "Don't. Hold it till I see you. Can you come up now?" I looked at the vacant white bed and said, "Yes," without much enthusiasm. Another tub of cold water hit me, so a little good that I almost fell asleep in it. Dan Rolfe let me in when I rang the girl's bell. He looked and acted as if nothing out of the ordinary has happened the night before. Dinah Brand came into the hall to help me off with my overcoat. She sat on a tan woolen dress with a 2-inch rip in one shoulder seam. She took me into the living room. She sat on the Chesterfield beside me and said, "I'm going to ask you to do something for me. You like me enough, don't you?" I admitted that. She counted the knuckles on my left hand with a warm forefinger and explained, "I want you to not do anything more about what I told you last night." Now wait a minute. Wait till I get through. Dan was right. I oughtn't to sell Max out like that. It would be utterly filthy. Besides, it's Noonan you chiefly want, isn't it? Well, if you be a nice darling and lay off Max this time, I'll give you enough on that Noonan guy to nail him forever. You'd like that better, wouldn't you? And you like me too much to want to take advantage of me by using my information I gave you when I was mad at that Max and had said all that, don't you?" "What is this dirt on Noonan?" I asked. She kneaded my biceps and murmured, "You promise?" "Not yet." She pouted at me and said, "I'm off Max for life, on the level. You've got no right to make me hurt a rat. Or, should I say, to make me turn a rat." "What about Noonan?" "Promise first." "No." She dug her fingers into my arm and asked sharply, "You've already gone to Noonan?" "Yeah." She let go of my arm, frowned, shrugged, and said gloomily, "Well, how can I help it?" I stood up and a voice said, "Sit down." It was a hoarse, whispering voice. Thaler's. I turned to see him standing in the dining room doorway, a big gun in one of his little hands. A red-faced man with a scarred cheek stood behind him. The other doorway opening to the hall filled as I sat down. The loose-mouthed, chinless man I had heard Whisper call Jerry came out to step through it. He had a couple of guns. The more angular one of the blonde kids, who had been in the King Street joint, looked over his shoulder. Dinah Brand got up from the Chesterfield, put her back to Thaler, and addressed me. Her voice was husky with rage. "This is none of my doing. He came here by himself, said he was sorry for what he'd said, and showed me how we could make a lot of coin by turning Noonan up for you. The whole thing was a plant, but I fell for it. Honest to Christ. He was waiting upstairs while I put it to you. I didn't know anything about the others. I didn't." Jerry's casual voice drawled, "If I shoot a pin from under her, she'll sure as sit down and maybe shut up, okay?" I couldn't see Whisper. The girl was between us. He said, "Not now. Where's Dan?" The angular blonde youngster said, "Up on the bathroom floor. I had to sap him." Dinah Brand turned around to face Thaler. Stocking seams made up an ample back of her legs, she said, "Max Thaler, you're a lousy little—" He whispered very deliberately, "Shut up and get out of the way." She surprised me by doing both, and she kept quiet while he spoke to me. "So you and Noonan are trying to paste his brother's death on me?" "It doesn't need pasting. It's natural." He curved his thin lips at me and said, "You're as crooked as he is." I said, "You know better. I played your side when he tried to frame you. This time he's got you copped to rights." Dinah Brand flared up again, her waving arms in the center of the room, storming, Get out of here, the whole lot of you. Why should I give a goddamn about your troubles? Get out. The blond kid who had sapped Rolf squeezed past Jerry and came grinning into the room. He caught one of the girl's flourished arms and bent it behind her. She twisted toward him, socked him in the belly with her fist. It was a very respectable wallop, man-size. It broke his grip on her arm, sent him back a couple of steps. The kid gulped a wide mouthful of air, whisked a blackjack from his hip, and stepped in again. His grin was gone. Jerry laughed what little chin he had out of sight. Thaler whispered harshly, "Lay off." The kid didn't hear him. He was snarling at the girl. She watched him with a face as hard as a silver dollar. She was standing with most of her weight on her left foot. I guessed Blondie was going to stop a kick when he closed in. The kid feigned a grab with his empty left hand, started the blackjack at her face. Thaler whispered, "Lay off," again, and fired. The bullet smacked Blondie under the right eye, spun him around, and dropped him backwards into Dinah Brand's arms. This looked like the time, if there was to be any. In the excitement, I got my hand up to my hip. Now I yanked the gun out and snapped a cap at Thaler, trying for his shoulder. That was wrong. If I had tried for a bullseye, I would have winged him. Chinless Jerry hadn't laughed himself blind. He beat me to the shot. His shot burst my wrist, or I should say, it burnt my wrist, but it felt like it burst it, throwing me off the target. But missing Thaler, my slug crumpled on the red-faced man behind him. Not knowing how badly my wrist was nicked, I switched the gun to my left hand. Jerry and another tried at me. The girl spoiled it by heaving a corpse at him. The dead yellowhead banged into his knees. I jumped for a while, and he was off balance. The jump took me out of the path of Thaler's bullet. It also tumbled me and Jerry into the hall, all tangled up together. Jerry wasn't tough to handle, but I had to work quick. There was Thaler behind me. I socked Jerry twice, kicked him and butted him at least once, and was hunting for a bite where he went limp under me. I poked him again, this time in the chin, or it should have been, just to make sure he wasn't faking, and went away on hands and knees, down the hall a bit and out of the line of the door. I sat on my heels against the wall, held my gun level at Thaler's part of the premises, and waited. I couldn't hear anything for the moment, except blood singing in my head. Dinah Brand stepped out from the door I had tumbled through, looked at Jerry and then at me. She smiled with her tongue between her teeth, beckoned with a jerk of her head, and returned to the living room. I followed her cautiously. Whisper stood in the door on the floor. His hands were empty, so was his face, except for his vicious little mouth. He looked like something displaying suits in a clothing store, or in the window of a clothing store. Dan Rolfe stood behind him, with a gun muzzle tilted to the little gambler's left kidney. Rolfe's face was mostly blood. The blond kid, now dead on the floor between Rolfe and me, had sapped him plenty. I grinned at Thaler and said, "Well, this is nice," before I saw that Rolfe had another gun, centered on my chubby middle. That wasn't so nice, but my gun was reasonably level in my hand. I didn't have much worse than an even break. Rolfe said, "Put down your pistol." I looked at Dinah, looked puzzled. I suppose. She shrugged and told me, "It seems to be Dan's party." "Yeah, somebody ought to tell him. I don't like to play this way." Rolfe repeated, "Put down your pistol." I said, disagreeably, "I'm damned if I will. I've shed 20 pounds trying to nab this bird, and I can spare 20 more for the same purpose." Rolfe said, "I'm not interested in what's between you two, and I have no intention of giving either of you." Dinah Brand had wandered across the room when she was behind Rolfe. I interrupted his speech by telling her, "If you upset him now, you're sure making two friends, Noonan and me. You can't trust Thaler anymore, so there's no use helping him." She laughed and said, Talk money, darling. Dinah, Rolf protested. He was caught. She was behind him, and she was strong enough to handle him. It wasn't likely that he would shoot her, and it wasn't likely that anything else would keep her from doing whatever she decided to do. $100, I bid. My God, she explained. I've actually got a cash offer out of you, but not enough. 200. You're getting reckless, but I can still hear you. Try, I said. It's worth that to me not to have to shoot Rolf's gun out of his hand, but no more than that. You got a good start. Don't weaken. One more bid. Anyway, $200.10, that's all. You big bum, she said. I won't do it. Suit yourself. I made a face at Thaler and cautioned him. When what happens, be damned. Sure you keep still, Dinah cried. Wait! Are you really going to start something? I'm going to take Thaler out with me, regardless. 200 and a dime? Yeah. Dinah, Rolf called without turning his face from me. You won't. But she laughed, came close to his back, and wound her strong arms around him, pulling his arms down, pinning him to his sides. I shoved Thaler out of the way with my right arm and kept my gun on him while I yanked Rolf's weapons out of his hands. Dinah turned the lunger loose. He took 2 steps towards the dining room, and warily, there is no, and collapsed on the floor. Dinah ran to him. I pushed Thaler through the hall door, past the still sleeping husband, and to the alcove beneath the front stairs where I had seen a phone. I called Noonan, told him I had Thaler and where. Mother of God, he said, don't kill him till I get there. Chapter 14. Max. The news of Whisper's capture spread quickly. When Noonan, the coppers he had brought along, and I took the gambler and the now conscious Jerry into City Hall, where there was at least 100 people standing around us. All of them didn't look pleased, and Noonan's coppers, a shabby lot at best, moved around with whitish, strained faces, but Noonan was the most triumphant guy west of the Mississippi. Even the bad luck he had had trying to third-degree Whisper couldn't spoil his happiness. Whisper stood up under all they could give him. He would talk to his lawyer, he said, and to nobody else, and he stuck to it. And, as much as Noonan hated the gambler, here was a prisoner he didn't give the works, didn't turn over to the wrecking crew. Whisper had killed the chief's brother, and the chief hated his guts, but Whisper was still too much somebody in Poisonville to be roughed around. Noonan finally got tired of playing with his prisoner and sent him up. The prison was on the City Hall's top floor to be stowed away. I lit another of the chief's cigars and read the detailed statement he got from the woman in the hospital. There was nothing in it that I hadn't learned from Dinah and Max Swain. The chief wanted me to come out to his house for dinner, but I lied out of it, pretending that my wrist, now in a bandage, was bothering me. It was really little more than a burn. While we were talking about it, a pair of plainclothesmen brought in the red-faced bird who had stopped the slug I missed Whisper with. It had a broken rib for him, and he had taken a backdoor sneak while the rest of us were busy. Noonan's men had picked him up in the doctor's office. The chief failed to get any information out of him and sent him off to the hospital. I got up and prepared to leave, saying, "The Brand girl gave me the tip-off on this. That's why I asked to keep her and Rolf out of it." The chief took hold of my left hand, and for the 5th or 6th time in the past couple of hours. "If you want her taken care of, that's enough for me," he assured me. "But if she's had a hand in turning that bastard up, you can tell her for me that anytime she wants anything, all she's got to do is name it." I said I'd tell her that and went over to my hotel, thinking about the neat white bed, but it was nearly 8 o'clock and my stomach needed attention. I went into the hotel dining room and had that fixed up. Then a leather chair tempted me into stopping in the lobby while I burnt a cigar. That led to a conversation with a traveling railroad auditor from Denver who knew a man I knew in St. Louis. Then there was a lot of shooting in the street. We went to the door and decided that the shooting was in the vicinity of City Hall. I shook the auditor and moved off and up that way. I had done 2/3 of the distance when an automobile came down the street towards me, moving fast and leaking gunfire from the rear. I backed into an alley entrance and slid my gun loose. The car came abreast. An arc light brightened 2 faces in front of the car. The drivers meant nothing to me. The upper part of the others was hidden by a pulled-down hat. The lower part was whispers. Across the street, the entrance to another block of my alley, lighted at the far end. Between the light and me, somebody moved just as Whisper's car rolled past. The somebody had dodged from behind one shadow that might have been an ash can to another. What made me forget Whisper was that somebody's legs had a bowed-out look. A load of coppers buzzed past, throwing lead at the first car. I skipped across the street into the section of the alley that held a man who might have bowed legs. If he was my man, it was fair bet he wasn't armed. I played it that way, moving straight up the slimy middle of the alley, looking into the shadows with eyes, ears, and nose. 3/4 of a block of this, and the shadow broke away from another shadow, a man going pell-mell away from me. "Stop!" I bawled, pounding my feet after him. "Stop, or I'll plug ya, McSwain." He ran 6 strides farther and stopped, turning. "Oh, it's you," he said, as if it made any difference who took him back to the hoosegow. "Yeah," I confessed. "What are all you people doing wandering around loose?" "I don't know nothing about it. Somebody dynamited the floor out of the can. I dropped through the hole and the rest of them. There was some mugs standing off the bowls. I made the back trotters with one of the bunch. Then we split, and I was figuring on cutting over and making the hills. I didn't have nothing to do with it. I just went along with it when she blew open. Whisper was pinched this evening," I told him. "Hell, then that's it. Noonan had ought to know. He'd deliver to keep that guy screwed up. Not in this burg." We were all standing still in the alley when McSwain had stopped running. "You know what he was pinched for?" I asked. For killing Tim?" "You know who killed Tim." "Huh, sure he did." "You did." "Huh? What's the matter? You simple?" "There's a gun in my left hand," I warned him. "But look here, didn't he tell you the broad that Whisper done it? What's the matter with you?" He didn't say Whisper. I've heard a woman call Thaler Max, but I've never heard a man here call him anything but Whisper. Tim didn't say Max. He said Max, the first part of Max Swain, and died before he could finish saying it. Don't forget about the gun. What would I have killed him for? He was after Whispers. I haven't got around to that yet, I admitted. But let's see. You and your wife had busted up. Tim was a ladies' man, wasn't he? Maybe there's something there. I'll have to look at it. What started me thinking about you was that you never tried to get any more money out of the girl. Cut it out, he begged. You know there ain't any sense to it. What would I have hung around afterwards for? I'd have been out getting an alibi like Whisper. Why? You were a dick then. Close by was the spot for you, to see that everything went right. Handle it yourself. You know damn well it don't hang together. Don't make any sense. Cut it out, for God's sakes. I don't mind how goofy this is, I said. It's something to put to Noonan when we get back. He's likely all broken up over Whisper's crush out. This will take his mind off of it. McSwain got down on his knees in the muddy alley and cried, Oh, Christ, no! He croaked me with his hands. Get up and stop yelling, I growled. Now, will you give it to me straight? He whined. He'd croaked me with his hands. Suit yourself. If you won't talk, I will, to Noonan. If you'll come through to me, I'll do what I can for you. What can you do? He asked hopelessly and started sniveling again. How do you know you'll try to do anything? I risked a little truth on him. You said you had a hunch what I'm up to here in Poisonville. Then you ought to know. It's my play to keep Noonan and Whisper split. Letting Noonan think Whisper killed Tim will keep them split. But if you don't want to play with me, come on, we'll play with Noonan. You mean you won't tell him? He asked eagerly. You promise? I promise you nothing, I said. Why should I? I've got you with your pants down. Talk to me, Noonan, and make up your mind quick. I'm not getting to stand here all night. He made up his mind to talk to me. I don't know how much you know, but it was like you said. My wife fell for Tim. That's what put me on the tramp. You can ask anybody. If I wasn't a good guy before that, it was this way. What she said I wanted her to have. Mostly what she wanted was tough on me, but I couldn't be any other way. We'd have been damned sight better off if I could. So I let her move out and put in the divorce papers so she could marry him, thinking he meant to. Pretty soon I begin to hear he's chasing this Myrtle Jennison. I couldn't do that. I'd given him his chance with Helen, fair and square. Now he was giving her the air for this Myrtle. I wasn't going to stand for that. Helen wasn't no hanky-panky. It was accidental, though, running into him at the lake that night when I saw him go down to the summer houses. I went after him. That looked like a good, quiet place to have it out. I guess we'd both had a little something to drink. Anyway, we had it hot and heavy. When it got too hot for him, he pulled the gun. He was yellow. I grabbed it, and in the tussle it went off. I swear to God, I didn't shoot him except like that. It went off, and the both of us had our hands on it. I beat it back in some bushes. But when I got into the bushes, I could hear him moaning and talking. There was people coming, a girl running down from the hotel, that Myrtle Jennison. I wanted to go back and hear what Tim was saying, so I'd know where I stood. But I was leery of being the first one there, so I had to wait till the girl got to him, listening all the time to his squawking, but too far away to make it out. When she got to him, I ran over and got there just as he died, trying to say my name. I didn't think about that being Whisper's name till she prepositioned me with the suicide letter, the 200 and the rock. I'd just been stalling around, pretending to get the job lined up, being on the force then, and trying to find out where I stood. Then she makes the play, and I know I'm sitting pretty. And that's the way it was. You started digging it all up again. He slopped his feet up and down in the mud and added, Next week my wife got killed. An accident. An accident. She drove the Ford square in front of number 6 where it comes down the long grade from Tanner and stopped it there. Is Mock Lake in this county? I asked. No, Boulder County. That's out of Noonan's territory. Suppose I take you over there and hand you over to the sheriff. No, he's Senator Kiefer's son-in-law, Tom Cook. I might as well be here. Noonan could get to me through Kiefer. If it happened the way you say, you've got at least an even chance of beating the rap in court. They won't give me a second chance. I'd have stood it if there'd been a chance in the world of getting an even break, but not with them. We're going back to the hall, I said. Keep your mouth shut. Noonan was waddling up and down the floor, cursing half a dozen bulls who stood around wishing they were somewhere else. Here's something I found roaming around, I said, pushing McSwain forward. Noonan knocked the ex-detective down, kicked him, and told one of the coppers to take him away. Somebody called Noonan on the phone. I slipped out without saying good night and walked back to the hotel. Off to the north, some guns popped. A group of 3 men passed me, shifty-eyed, walking pigeon-toed. A little further along, another man moved all the way over to the curb to give me plenty of room to pass. I didn't know him. I didn't suppose he knew me. A lone shot sounded not far away. As I reached the hotel, a battered black touring car went down the street, hitting 50 at least, crammed to the curtains with men. I grinned after it. Poisonville was beginning to boil out from under the lid, and I felt so much like a native that even the memory of my very unnice part in the boiling didn't keep me from getting 12 solid end-to-end hours of sleep. Chapter 15, Cedar Hill. Mickey Lennon used the phone to wake me up a little after noon. "We're here," he told me. "Where's the reception committee? Probably stopped to get a rope. Check your bags. Come up to the hotel, room 537. Don't advertise your visit." I was dressed when they arrived. Mickey Lennon was a big slob with sagging shoulders and a shapeless body that seemed to be coming apart at the joints. His ears stood out like red wings, and his round face usually wore the meaningless smirk of a half-wit. He looked like a comedian, and was. Dick Foley was a boy-sized Canadian with a sharp, irritable face. He wore high heels to increase his height, perfumed his handkerchiefs, and saved all the words he could. They were both good operatives. "What did the old man tell you about the job?" I asked, when he had settled into his seats. The old man was the manager of the Continental's San Francisco branch. He was also known as Pontius Pilate, because he smiled pleasantly when he sent us out to be crucified on suicidal jobs. He was a gentle, polite, elderly person, with no more warmth in him than a hangman's rope. The agency wits said he could spit icicles in July. He didn't seem to know much about what it was all about, Mickey said, except that you had wired for help. He said he hadn't got any reports from you for a couple of days. The chances are he'll wait a couple more. Know anything about this Personville? Dick shook his head. Mickey said, "Only that I've heard parties call it Poisonville, like they mean it." I told him that I knew what they had done. The telephone bell interrupted my tale in the last quarter. Dinah Brown's lazy voice. "Hello? How's the wrist?" "Only a burn. What do you think of the crush out?" "It's not my fault," she said. "I did my part. If Noonan couldn't hold him, that's just too bad. I'm coming downtown to buy a hat this afternoon. I thought I'd drop in to see you for a couple of minutes if you're going to be there." "What time?" "Around 3. "Right. I'll expect you. And have that 200 and a dime you owe me." "Do?" she said. That's what I'm coming in for. Ta-ta." I went back to my seat and my story. When I had finished, Mickey Lyman whistled and said, "No wonder you're scared. To send any reports, the old man wouldn't do much if he knew what you've been up to, would he?" "If it works out the way I want it to, I won't have to report at all those distressing details," I said. "It's right enough for the agency to have the rules and regulations. But when you're out on a job, you've got to do the best you can. Anybody that brings any ethics to Poisonville is going to get them all rusty. A report is no place for the dirty details, anyhow. And I want you birds to send any writing back to San Francisco without letting me see it first." "What kind of crimes have you got for this to pull?" Mickey asked. "I want you to take Pete the Finn. Dick will take Lou Yard. You'll have to play it the way I've been playing it. Do what you can, when you can. I have an idea that the pair of them will try to make Noonan let Whisper alone. I don't know what he'll do. He's shifty as hell. And when he does want even up his brother's killing. After I take this Finnish agent, or this Finnish gent," Mickey said, "what do I do with him? I don't want to brag about how dumb I am. But this job is plain as astronomy to me. I understand everything about it except what you've done and why you're trying to do it and how. You can start by shadowing him. I've got to have a wedge that can be put between Pete and Yard. Yard and Noonan, Pete and Noonan, Pete and Thaler, or Yard and Thaler. If we can smash things up enough and break the combination, they'll have their knives in each other's backs, doing our work for us. The break between Thaler and Noonan was a starter, but it'll sag on us if we don't get help along. I could buy more dope on the whole lot from Dinah Brand, but there's no use in taking anybody into court, no matter what you've got on them. They own the courts, and besides, the courts are too slow for us now. I've got myself tangled up in something. As soon as the old man smells it, San Francisco isn't far enough away to fool his nose. He's going to be sitting on the wire, asking for explanations. I've got to have results to hide the details under, so evidence won't do. What we've got to do has to have dynamite. What about our respected client, Mr. Ilya Wilson? Mickey asked. What are you planning to do with him? Maybe ruin him? Maybe club him into backing us up? I don't care which. You better stay at Hotel Person, Mickey. And Dick, you go to the National. Keep apart. And if you want to keep me from being fired, burn the job up before the old man tumbles. Better write these down. I gave them the names, descriptions, addresses. When I had them, of Ilya Wilson, Stanley Lewis, his secretary, Dinah Brand, Dan Rolfe, Noonan, Max Thaler, alias Whisper, his right-hand man, the chinless Jerry, Mrs. Donald Wilson, Lewis's daughter, who had been Donald Wilson's secretary, and Bill Quint, Dinah's radical ex-boyfriend. Now, hop to it, I said, and don't kid yourselves that there's any law in Poisonville except what you make for yourself. Mickey said I'd be surprised how many laws he could get along without. Dick said, so long, and they departed. After breakfast, I went over to City Hall. Noonan's greenish eyes were bleary, as if they hadn't been sleeping, and his face lost some of its color. He pumped my hand and up and down enthusiastically as ever. The customary amount of cordiality was in his voice and manner. Any line on Whisper? I asked when I had finished glad handling. I think I've got something. He looked at the clock on the wall and then at his phone. I'm expecting word any minute. Sit down. Who else got away? Jerry Hooper, Tony Agosti, and the other ones still out. We picked up the rest. Jerry is Whisper's man Friday, and the Wop's one of his mob guys. He's the bozo that put the knife in Ike the night of the fight. Any more of Whisper's mob in? No. We just had 3 of them, except for Buck Willis, the fellow you potted. He's in the hospital. The chief looked at the wall clock again, and then at his watch. It was exactly 2 o'clock. He turned to the phone. It rang. He grabbed it and said, Noonan talking. Yes? 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 Right. He pushed the phone aside and played a tune on the row of pearl buttons on his desk. The office filled up with coppers. Cedar Hill is in, he said. You follow me out with your detail, Bates. Terry, shoot out to Broadway and hit the dump from behind. Pick up the boys on traffic duty as you go along. It's likely we'll need everybody we can get. Duffy, take yours out to Union Street, around the old mine road. McGraw will hold headquarters down. Get hold of everybody you can and send them after us. Jump. He grabbed his hat and went after them, calling over his thick shoulder to me. Come on, man. This is the kill. I followed him down the department garage, where the engines of half a dozen cars were roaring. The chief sat beside his driver. I sat back with 4 detectives. Men scrambled into their cars. Machine guns were unwrapped. Armloads of rifles and riot guns were distributed, and packages of ammunition. The chief's car got away first, off with a jump, that hammered our teeth together. We missed the garage door by half an inch, chased a couple of pedestrians diagonally across the sidewalk, bounced off the curb into the roadway, missed the truck as narrowly as we had missed the door, and dashed out King Street with our siren wide open. Panicky automobiles darted right and left, regardless of traffic rules, to let us through. It was a lot of fun. I looked back, saw another police car followed us, a third turning into Broadway. Noonan chewed a cold cigar and told the driver, Give her a bit more, Pat. Pat twisted us around and frightened a woman's coupe, put us through a slot between a streetcar and a laundry wagon, a narrow lot that we couldn't have slipped through if our car hadn't been so smoothly enameled, and said, All right, put the brakes. Ain't no good. That's nice, the gray-mustached sleuth on my left said. He didn't sound sincere. Out of the center of the city, there wasn't much traffic to bother us, but the paving was rougher. It was a nice half-hour's ride, with everybody's getting a chance to sit in everybody else's lap. The last 10 minutes it was over an uneven road that had hills enough to keep us from forgetting what Pat had said about the brakes. He wound up at the gate, topped by a shabby electric sign that said, Cedar Hill Inn, before it lost its globes. The roadhouse, 20 feet behind the gates, was a squat wooden building, painted a moldy green and chiefly surrounded by rubbish. Front door and windows were closed blank. We followed Noonan out of his car. The machine had been trailing us, came into sight around the bend of the road, slid to rest beside ours, and unloaded its cargo of men and weapons. Noonan ordered this and that. A trio of coppers went around to each side of the building. 3 others, including the machine gunner, remained by the gate. The rest of us walked through the tin cans, bottles, ancient newspapers to the front of the house. The gray-mustached detective who sat beside me in the car carried a red axe. We stepped up on the porch. Noise and fire came out from under a windowsill. The gray-mustached detective fell down, hiding the axe under his corpse. The rest of us ran away. I ran with Noonan. We hid in a ditch on the inside of the road. It was deep enough and banked high enough to let us stand almost erect without being his targets. The chief was excited. "What luck," he said happily. "He's here. By God, he's here." "That shot came from under the sill," I said. "Not a bad trick." "We'll spoil it, though," he said cheerfully. We'll sieve the dump. Duffy ought to be pulling up the other side of the road by now, and Terry Shane won't be many minutes behind. Hey, Donner," he called to the man who was peeping around the boulder, "swing around back. Tell Duffy and Shane to start closing in as soon as they come, letting fly with all they got. Where's Kimball?" The peeper jerked the thumb toward the tree beyond him. We could see only the upper part of it from the ditch. "Tell him to set his mill and start grinding," Noonan ordered. "Low across the front ought to do it, like cutting cheese." The peeper disappeared. Noonan went up and down the ditch, risking his noodle, over the top and then looking forward and around, once in a while calling out or gesturing to his men. He came back, sat on his heels beside me, gave me a cigar and lit one for himself. "It'll do," he said complacently. "Whisper won't have a chance. He's done." The machine gun by the tree fired haltingly, experimenting, 8 or 10 shots. Noonan grinned and let a smoke ring float out of his mouth. The machine gun settled down to business, grinding out metal like it was a busy little death factory that it was. Noonan blew another smoke ring and said, "That's exactly what'll do it." I agreed that it ought to. We leaned against the clay bank and smoked a while. Farther away, another machine gun got going, and then a third. Irregularly, rifles, pistols, shotguns joined in. Noonan nodded approvingly and said, 5 minutes of that will let him know that there's a hell." When the 5 minutes were up, I suggested we look at the remains. I gave him a boost up the bank and scrambled up after him. The roadhouse was bleak and empty-looking as it was before, but more battered. No shots came from it. Plenty were going into it. "What do you think?" Noonan asked. "If there was a cellar, there might be a mouse alive in it. Well, we could finish him afterwards." He took a whistle out of his pocket and made a lot of noise. He waved his fat arms, and gunfire began dwindling. We had to wait for the word to go all the way around. Then we crashed the door. The first floor was ankle deep with booze that was still gurgling from bullet holes that were stacked up in cases and barrels that filled most of the house. Dizzy with the fumes of spilled hooch, he waited around until we had found our 4 dead bodies, and no live ones. The 4 were swarthy, foreign-looking men in laborers' clothes. 2 of them were practically shot to pieces. Noonan said, "Leave them here and get them out." His voice was cheerful, but in a flashlight's glow, his eyes showed white rings of fear. He went out gladly, though I did hesitate long enough to pocket an unbroken bottle labeled Dewar. A khaki-dressed copper was tumbling off a motorcycle at the gate. He yelled at us, "The First National's been struck!" Noonan cursed savagely, bawled, "He's foxed us! Damn him! Back to town, everybody!" Everybody except us, who had ridden with the chief, beat it for the machines. 2 of them took the dead detective with them. Noonan looked at me with the corner of his eye and said, "This is a tough one. No fooling." I said, "Well," shrugged and sauntered over to the car, where the driver was sitting at the wheel. I stood with my back to the house, talking to Pat. I don't remember what we talked about. Presently Noonan and the other sleuths joined us. Only a little flame shone through the open roadhouse door before we passed out of sight around the bend in the road. Chapter 16. Exit Jerry. There was a mob around the First National Bank. We pushed through the door where we found sour-faced McGraw. Was 6 of them, and masked, he reported the chief as we went inside. They hit at about 2:30. 5 of them got away, clean with Jack. The watchman here dropped one of them, Jerry Hooper. He's over on the bench, cold. We got the roads blocked, and I wired around if it ain't too late. Last seen of them was they made a turn around King Street in back of Lincoln. We went over to look at Jerry, dead, lying on one of the lobby benches with a brown robe over him. The bullet had gone in under his left shoulder blade. The bank watchman, a harmless-looking old duffer, pushed up his chest and told us about it. There wasn't no chance to do nothing at first. They were there for anybody that didn't know nothing. We knew nothing. Anything could have happened. And maybe they didn't work fast. Right down the line, scooping it up. No chance to do anything then. But I says to myself, all righty, young fellows, you've got it all your own way now, but wait till you try to leave. And I was good as my word, you bet you. I runs right to the door right after them and cut loose with an old firearm. I got that fellow just as he was stepping into the car. I bet I'd have got more of them if I had more cartridges, because it's kind of hard shooting down like that, standing. Noonan stopped the monologue by patting the old duffer back till his lungs were empty, telling him, "That certainly is fine. That certainly is fine." McGraw pulled up the robe up over the dead man again and growled, "Nobody can identify anybody, but with Jerry on it, it's a cinch it was Whisper's caper." The chief nodded happily and said, "I'll leave it in your hands, Mac. Going to poke around here or going back to Hall with me?" he asked. "Neither. I've got a date. I want to get to my dry shoes." Dinah Brand's little Marmon was standing in the front of the hotel. I didn't see her. I went up to my room, leaving the door unlocked. I had got my hat and coat off when she came in without knocking. "My gosh, you keep a boozy-smelling room," she said. "It's my shoes. Noonan took me waiting in the rum." She crossed the window, opened it, sat on the sill, and asked, "What was that for?" "He thought he was going to find your Max out in a dump called Cedar Hill Inn. So we went out there, shot the joint silly, murdered some Dagos, spilled gallons of liquor, and left the place burning." "Cedar Hill Inn? I thought it had been closed for a year or more." "It looked it, but it was somebody's warehouse." "But you didn't find Max there?" she asked. "While we were there, he seems to have been knocking over Ilio's First National Bank." "I saw that," she said. "I had just come out of Brennigan's, the store 2 doors away. I had just got in my car when I saw a big boy out of the bank carrying a sack and a gun with a black handkerchief over his face." "Was Max with him?" "No, he wouldn't be. He'd send Jerry and the boys. That's what he was for them." "Jerry was there. I knew him as soon as he got out of the car, in spite of the black handkerchief. They all had black ones. 4 of them came out of the bank, running down to the car at the curb. Jerry and another fellow were in the car. When 4 of them came across the sidewalk, Jerry jumped out and went to meet them. That's when the shooting started and Jerry dropped. The others jumped in the bus and lit out. How about that dough you owe me?" I counted out $20 bills and a dime. She left the window to come for them. "That's for pulling Dan off, so you could cop Max," she said, when she had stowed the money away in her bag. "Now, how about what I was to get for showing you where you could turn up the dope on his killing Tim Noonan?" "He'll have to wait till he's indicted. How do I know that dope's any good?" She frowned and asked, "What do you do with all the money you don't spend?" Her face brightened. "You know where Max is now." "No." "What's it worth to you?" "Nothing." "I'll tell you for $100. I wouldn't want to take advantage of you that way. I'll tell you for $50. I shook my head. 25. I don't want him, I said. I don't care where he is. Why don't you peddle the news to Noonan? Yes, and try to collect. Do you only perfume yourself with booze, or is there any for drinking purposes? Here's a bottle of so-called Devoir that I picked up at the Cedar Hill this afternoon. There's a bottle of King George in my bag. What's your choice? She voted for King George. We had a drink apiece, straight, and I said, sit down and play with me for a while I change clothes. When I came out of the bathroom 25 minutes later, she was sitting as secretary, smoking a cigarette and studying the memoranda book that I had been in the side pocket of my Gladstone bag. I guess these are expenses you've charged up to other cases, she said without looking up. I'm damned if I can see why you can't be more liberal with me. Look, here's a $600 item marked INF. That's information you bought from somebody, isn't it? And here's $150 below it, top, whatever that is. And here's another day when you spent nearly $1,000. They must be telephone numbers, I said, taking the book from her. Where were you raised? Fanning my baggage. I was raised in a convent, she told me. I won the Good Behavior Prize every year I was there. I thought little girls who put on extra spoons of sugar in their chocolate went to hell for gluttony. I didn't even know there was such a thing as profanity until I was 18. The first time I heard any, I damn near fainted. She spit on the rug in front of her, tilted her chair back, put her crossed feet on my bed and asked, what do you think of that? I pushed her feet off the bed and said, I was raised in a waterfront saloon. Yeah, that's right. I was raised in a waterfront saloon. Keep your saliva off my floor, or I'll toss you out on your neck. Let's have another drink first. Listen, what do you give me for the inside story of how the boys didn't lose anything building City Hall? The story that was in the papers. I sold Donald Willison. That doesn't click with me. Try another. How about why the first Mrs. Lou Yard was sent to the insane asylum? No. King, our sheriff, $8,000 in debt 4 years ago. Now is the owner of a nice collection of downtown business blocks, as you'd want to see. I can't give you all of it, but I can show you where to get it. Keep trying, I encouraged her. No, you don't want to buy anything. You're just hoping you'll pick something up for nothing. This isn't bad scotch. Where'd you get it? Brought it from San Francisco with me. What's the idea of not wanting any of this information I'm offering you? Think you can get it cheaper? Information of that kind is not much good to me now. I've got to move quick. I need dynamite, something to blow them apart. She laughed, and she jumped up with her big eyes sparkling. I've got one of Lou Yard's cards. Suppose we sent the bottle of Devoir you copped to Pete with a card. Wouldn't he take it as a declaration of war? If Cedar Hill was a liquor cache, it was Pete's. Wouldn't the bottle and Lou's card make him think Noonan had knocked the place over under orders? I considered this and said, too crude. It wouldn't fool him. Besides, I'd just as leave Pete and Lou both against the chief at this stage. She pouted and said, you think you know everything? You're just as hard to get along with. Take me out tonight. I've got a new outfit that'll knock 'em cockeyed. Yeah. Come up for me around 8. She patted my cheek with a warm hand and said, ta-ta, and off she went, out as the telephone bell began jingling. My cinch and Dick's are together at your client's joint. Mickey Lennon reported over the wire. Mine's been generally busier than a hustler with 2 bunks, though I don't know what the score is yet. Anything new? I said there wasn't, and went into the conference with myself across the bed, trying to guess what would come of Noonan's attack on Cedar Hill and whispers on the First National Bank. I would have given something for the ability to hear what was being said up at old Iliu's house by him, Pete and Finn and Lou Yard, but I hadn't that ability, and I was never as much good at guessing. So, after half an hour, I stopped tormenting my brain and took a nap. It was nearly 7 o'clock when I came out of the nap, and I washed, dressed, and loaded my pockets with a gun and a pint in a flask of scotch, and went up to Dinah's. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 16. Thank you for joining me for another night of story time. Tomorrow night, we will continue reading The Red Harvest with chapter 17. All right, friends, have a good night. Bye-bye.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.